dear listeners, and welcome back to the VVA podcast. My name is Leila Oresme.
And I'm Cristina Tumino.
And today we have our wonderful guest back, Alison Armstrong.
Yes.
Welcome back. It's so good to
back.
see you here.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
And just for everyone that doesn't know who Alison Armstrong is an author, educator, and creator of the widely acclaimed Understanding Men and Understanding Women transformational online series. She explores the good reasons behind the behaviour of men and women, such as fundamental differences in the ways we think, act, and communicate. She offers simple, partnership-based solutions to improve our communication and intimacy by honouring ourselves and others. Today's interview will focus on her incredible book, The Queen's Code, which is now available in an audiobook format.
Yes, and before we start, actually, I would like to say, Alison, I loved your book. I think it's clever, it's sweet, it has important things that I think are very every woman can relate to, a man can relate to, and I loved it, and I love to hear your voice, and it's like you became my best friend. I really loved it.
It's absolutely stunning. I've read the book last year actually. So I had the Kindle version and I loved it. But hearing the audiobook version is just, I think it's your voice, Alison. You have such great energy, and just having your voice in my headphones is almost like so soothing, you know? So it's amazing.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question, Leila?
Of course.
So what I experienced in recording the book was, oh my gosh, this is so much more intense than someone would have read it to themselves. And a woman in South Africa just last week said that she couldn't have read to herself the sincerity of the men in the way that they were interacting, because she saw she was prejudiced. In her own prejudice against men, she would never have read their words with such sincerity, such intensity, such commitment, because she didn't think they had it in them.
That's so interesting. Personally, I think because I've like binge watched all of your interviews before reading the book.
Yes.
So I was already transformed. And I guess when I was reading it, I felt like you were talking to me through the book anyway. But having the audiobook has just created like another level for it. So it's amazing. But I can totally understand how women might not be able to read it that way if they still have that prejudice. So that's very cool.
It's the danger also of like texting, right? That tone is inferred, and if we think the person's mad at us, we'll read it to ourselves in like a snarky tone from them.
Yeah, and then it creates all kinds of issues.
All kinds of stuff. That's why I include, like encourage voice messages. Use voice messages. There's no amount of emojis that can make up for what someone's thinking in your head, right? In their head about you, until you correct it with the sincerity of your own intent. And especially ladies, leave voice messages for men.
Okay.
There's something about the voice, the female voice.
Well, studies have shown men process the female voice in the same part of their brain as music. Which is why complaining is like to
it's
them.
More powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
Very interesting.
I will use this as a tip alongside all the other ones and the exercises in the book that I love doing myself. You did
the exercises
with my husband. Yes, and you know what I was thinking? Yes, last night while I was sleeping, I was kind of sleeping. I was thinking, oh wow, like the characters. Of course, I'm not going to talk about this, but I don't know. I see the three of us now, like in some way, the three, some of the characters.
That's awesome.
I do. But I did the exercise with my husband. I was practicing, and I didn't know some of them in some way. I kind of used to do it before, and I didn't know I was doing them.
Yes.
Like things that I used to do in the past, and some were new, very, very interesting. Like what you expect is not what you think. Like you think something, and when you do them, you expect, and you're like, oh wow, it's even different than what I expected, even if I thought I knew.
Well, can I ask, because I know we don't want to reveal the plot, because it is fiction, and it's a story, right? And from 8 points of view. So you're inside the heads of 4 different men and 4 different women. And I didn't know the plot, by the way. the process of I didn't write it. I did not write the Queen's Code. I watched the movie and I typed as fast as I could. So, some of the evolutions and the romance and the struggles and stuff like that, we don't want to reveal, but I'm so curious, Christina. So when you say you did it with your husband, was it like asking him about ways that you emasculate him or did emasculate him? Or was it maybe the question later on that takes so much courage? Is there anything you need from me you've given up on getting?
Actually, I tried on all of them. I did all of them. And there were some clips that actually I told him after we were talking. I said, "Do you want to listen to this? What do you think?"
Oh, perfect! I'm so glad you did that.
Yes, and he was actually listening, and they are really. I can see lots of the things you say in the book. It is.
It really is. For me, it was the listening part, waiting 30 seconds for an answer. And I've realized that sometimes I can wait 2 minutes and the answer comes, but it's like, for me, it's like, I've already forgotten that I've asked the question.
Yeah,
but the answer comes and I'm like, oh my God, like they were actually thinking about it.
They usually commit more to the question than we do, which is why we don't wait for an answer, right? And then they start to learn, don't even bother because they don't really care, which can go very much. Yeah, but when they figure out that we're listening and we're not going to interrupt, this happened with my brother a couple weeks ago, who takes a long time to answer a question, and usually he just doesn't talk to people. And when he figured out that neither me nor Dan, my boyfriend, were going to interrupt, that we actually were waiting for the answer, he started responding more quickly and responding more fully. Like, it was amazing.
Definitely. So let's talk about frog farming, because that is such an interesting concept that was just absolutely mind-blowing, but it's so real. So why don't you explain to us what frog farming is and why do us women have such a bad tendency to do so?
Oh, gosh. Well, okay. Can I give you a little backstory?
Yes, of course.
So it was interesting that you said, Christina, that like the 3 of us are like the characters in the book, right? So I'm assuming none of us at this point is Melissa.
Yeah, no. I mean,
who's majorly been frog farming and blaming the frog. So what happened to Kimberly in the first chapter of the book, where her friend was called a frog farmer, that happened to me. I was Kimberly at that point. and the man who called my friend Lisa and colleague a frog farmer, who was the one who said, sports watching, pizza eating, beer belching, couch slugs. He used to be a veterinarian before he became a transformational seminar leader. He was a veterinarian. So I always wondered if that factored into him saying you're turning You know, instead of turning frogs into princes, you're turning princes into frogs. And I really thought that men were con artists, and that in the beginning, when they were trying to catch you, they put their best foot forward. And then either after they caught you, they would revert to their normal selves. And whether it was caught you, like got you into bed, if that's what they were up to, or caught you like you fell in love with them, right? Like you just wanted to be with them and no one else. Then they changed. And I thought that's when they became normal. That's when they became jerks, right? And weren't so attentive, weren't so romantic, weren't so caring, weren't so, anxious to chase you around the bedroom, weren't like everything that was great in the beginning was gone. And after, his name is Herb, after Herb said that to my friend, that you're a frog farmer, I was thrilled. It was like, oh my gosh, if I'm doing something, I can stop doing that. Right? I tried to change men. I tried to, complain about they weren't like they were in the beginning, try to cajole and connive and change myself. But I didn't know when I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a frog farmer. I had no idea how I did it because I was so normal. I interacted with men the same way every other woman, every other sitcom, my mother, everyone I knew did. And the idea that maybe we were bringing out the worst in men and then thinking that's who men are, fascinating to me. And, more than 30 years later, it's been proven over and over and over and over again how much men are responding to women. And then where they're not responding to women, but we think they are. And so we're mad at them because we think they did it because of us, when it just is how men do things and how men think. It ruins everything. It's so sad.
I was actually thinking, what Leila just said about her example, when you have to wait for the person to say.
Waiting for the well, I call it. Yeah.
Yes. This in the past, and about what's the word when you're emasculating them? Is that the word? Yeah.
It's a softer word.
Yes. I know.
It's a good word.
Yes. I'm thinking, because I know that it's true, we can get the worst from them. But in my experience, because some of the stuff that you say in the book, as I said, I didn't know I was actually applied in the code before I read and before I knew about the book. And one interesting thing is that there was a period that I was actually doing this with specific stuff. And because we both started to go through a journey of more like self-discovery and understanding more about ourselves, we got to a point that at some point he decided to come to me and say, look, I don't like this. And that's where I was like, oh, I didn't know. So that's when we started to talk more about certain things and find it that way. So I'm thinking, when the fact that men, it's like men allow us to do this, that would be interesting as well from their side. And I'm not saying, of course, I have all my work to do and work on myself. But when they stand up and they understand and they say, look, because their way, when they talk and you come from a place of place of love, and you say, look, but why are you doing this? Or why are you talking in this way? Then I can be like, oh, maybe you're right. I didn't even notice this. And then we can start to talk. So from the other way, I think it's an interesting thing to do as well. If
I would love to add something here, because even though I've read the Queen's Code last year, and I had all this knowledge, over time we fall back into our old habits and our own, just all these sabotaging ways. And I feel like there's such a big part of actually knowing ourselves, which is like the key process in all of this, because sometimes we do things that are so cruel and we don't even realize we are doing it. And I've caught myself many times doing that. And I was like, oh my God, why did I say that? And it's just, you can see the man proper just, just it's like his life force just leaves them, and it's just like, oh my God, I need to apologize because that was just the worst thing I could have said to a man. And I guess before that, I would never even realize that that was such a bad thing. I would just think that, I'm just getting back at him for whatever he's done, right? And it's just such a good thing to see what I'm lacking personally and the knowledge I'm not realizing about myself that is causing all of this and actually triggering people to act a certain way. Because at the end of the day, we are the only ones that can, change ourselves. We can't change anybody. So it's just amazing to have those tools that you have given us in this book.
Well, I love what you're both bringing up. The Queen's Code in the last few years has come to the awareness of men involved in the men's movement, primarily because of a man named Will Spencer, who's creating something called the Renaissance of Men. And when he read the Queen's Code, it was the first book he'd ever read by a woman that not only was affirming in being a man, but also revealed to him why he did what he did. And so we even have men participating in, it's called Your Queen's Code Journey, where chapter by chapter I answer questions and in a live webinar. And it's so fun to see everybody's faces. And it's for the men, them finding out why women do what they do, the fear and frustration that's behind and also the hurt, right? The fear, the hurt, and the frustration that's behind what you call the cruel things that we do, Layla. And many of them are cruel. Many of them are just oblivious. Like there are times I didn't mean to be cruel. I just didn't know that mattered to them. I didn't know that would hurt. I thought they couldn't really be hurt. They weren't hurt by the things I was hurt by, so therefore they can't be hurt. So let it rip, right? So many misconceptions that we have about them. But we've noticed that the more men understand what causes women to do things that diminish them, sorry about that, the more resilience they have, the more they are not affected by it. It's like it stops at their door and they're just being able to see the woman and have compassion for her. Like the dinner date with Jack and Kimberly, where at first he was aghast at what she said and then looked closer and saw how tender this was for her, how scary this was for her, right? And what an acknowledgement it was of her even to share that with him. And that keeps happening. It keeps happening to men where they're getting to be in the head of those four women. They're getting to understand what's happening with women when they do what we do. And then they're less susceptible to being emasculated, which is awesome. It's actually possible for a man to get to the point where no matter what we do, he's fine. He's completely grounded in himself and he doesn't get diminished by what anybody does, which is also true for us as women. Right? We're profoundly affected by the way that we're being responded to and we misinterpret it so often, right? And then we end up feeling hurt or disrespected. And what if none of us had to go down that terrible rabbit hole?
Yeah, fascinating.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, with Layla, we do this podcast on Vast Vision associations. There is a lot as well to do with, knowing ourselves, understanding ourselves, but deeply, like be courageous and go deep. And of course, you need to be willing yourself to do it, not because somebody tells, but when you are ready in some way to do it. And in some way, it's like when I read the book, I saw it more as a journey of self-discovery, because while we are learning about men, how to listen to them, we learn how to listen to ourselves. When we learn how to understand them, we need to be honest. So we learn to be honest even with ourselves, with our needs, with our anything that we need. So, and that's where we understand, and we can understand what does it mean to be a woman, a proper woman. I don't want to use words can not be right in this case, but like, you know, like a strong woman, a proper woman.
Yes.
And in some way, by knowing who you are, then you can really like shine your light, but at the same time be strong and be the right partner for the man that is actually a partner. So and I saw it a lot as more as a journey of self-discovery. Even when I was doing all the exercises in the book, I was actually learning a bit more about myself first, and then asking and questioning and being a bit more humble in some way to see like, oh, okay, so this is the way to use, this is the, and I think it works perfectly. I love it with like our audience and the work we do with Layla. I don't know, Layla, what do you think? Is that
absolutely
as well?
Yeah, and I think it's just, it can be so scary, like finding out certain things about yourself and then having to communicate them to someone else, especially someone, you know, that you fancy. It's like, oh my God, I really have to, you know, confess certain things, and it can be so scary. And I just love that in the book you give us the tools to actually give us the right words to use, and to make sure that the feeling behind them is correct as well. Because I feel like, you know, those things are, people always talk about communication, right? You know, let's communicate and talk about things, but often that ends up in fights with men because we don't know what words to use, and we just end up attacking each other, and then it's a war instead of an actual conversation and being vulnerable with someone and creating real intimacy. So tell us more about that, maybe.
Sure. Let's see, where do I start? So because of the way that men and women both interpret the other as if you're like me, right? You're just like me. You just have an Audi instead of an innie, or an innie instead of an Audi. We just have different physical parts, but other than that, we're the same. And so we project onto the other person that they do what they do for the same reason I would. And then we're hurt, or we are mad because we feel disrespected. I would never do that to anyone I respected, right? I would never do that to anyone I loved. I would naturally do that for someone I loved. I wouldn't have to be asked. Of course I would do that for someone I loved, right? So we have all these thoughts, right? And men, for example, when they're interrupted, they think you must not care about what I'm talking about. And I'm talking about something that's important to me. So if you don't care what I'm talking about, you don't care about what's important to me, you don't care about me. Right? And they don't know that with diffuse awareness, right, what estrogen does to the brain, that we didn't decide this other thing was more important than listening to them. We get distracted. We're just like, you're just yanked into, oh, I forgot the salt. And we jump up and get the salt, right? Because that seems urgent. We got to have the salt. Not realizing they're in the middle of telling us something that they don't care about the salt. They want to communicate this thing with us. They want to be known by us, but we don't naturally listen to them in a way that allows them to be known by us, right? And then the same thing happens for us. We want to be known by them, but they don't naturally ask questions because they have this privacy thing that's part of their instincts. If you wanted me to know, you tell me. So we actually have to tell men what questions are good to ask us. And not how are you? That's not one of the good questions. They expect a one-word answer, maybe two, and they're going to get a whole report, right? So it's good to give them questions we like to be asked. Like Dan asks me, is there anything you want me to know about you? And then I get to sort through all the things I could tell him to the things I really want him to know about me, the things that are significant, right? So what happens, what you're describing, Layla, is we come to a conversation where one or both of us has felt hurt or disrespected, or both, by what happened, and now we're going to talk about it. But we come to it hurt, and therefore when we're hurt or we're angry, the last thing we want to do is expose ourselves more, right? That seems like now you can even hurt me more, or you can get me even worse. And so it's the last time we want to be vulnerable. We just, no, we're not going to come vulnerable. We're going to come locked and loaded. And then that's how you have the thing you're talking about. And the words in the Queen's Code come from, it took me 15 years to figure out how to write the book after I knew it needed to be written. And it comes from having learned how the way we're being, men are very sensitive to, and the words we use, they have a particular relationship to. If you think about it, they invented dictionaries. If you want to know what a man means, look it up in the dictionary.
That's true.
Yeah. And so the words matter to them, like the difference between a problem and an issue. Problems have solutions by definition, and they love solving problems. Issues have no solution. They're going to go on forever, and talking about it is a waste of time and energy. But what is a woman more likely to say? Issue. Not knowing that that actually has him just go like this, where if you say, could you help me with a problem? What? They'd go lean into that, or they'd be like, oh, I would, but I can't right now. So it's important to say, sometime in the next 2 days, could you help me with a problem? Oh yeah, absolutely. How about tonight? Right? So the specificity, they take things so literally. And that's why it's important to construct what we're saying, not to be careful and protect ourselves, to construct what we're saying so that we can expose ourselves to them in a way that is actionable, that's winnable, that's worth doing. They need to have all those things in order to engage instinctually. If this is not a time to act, they don't lean into it. If they can't succeed at it, they're going to head back, right? And if there appears to be no upside, like this will just have you stop being mad at me, but it won't actually get us to a good place. We'll just get to zero. Zero is never worth it to a man. Never worth it
Waste
to a man.
of energy, isn't it?
What?
The waste of the energy.
It's a huge waste of energy. And so, but as women, we'll do a lot to have someone stop being upset. So we try to motivate men by letting them know how upset we are, thinking that that'll have them dig in the way that we would. No, it doesn't.
And I think that also goes back to what Christina was saying about self-knowledge, because if we don't know ourselves what we need and what we want, there is no way that a man can solve the problem for us, because actually when we don't know what the problem is, it is an issue. It literally, that's when it is an issue, because it's not solvable unless we know what the hell the problem is.
Yes. And that's one of the things that's awesome about the question, the sentence that Claudia gives Karen and Kimberly, and then Kimberly, goes to work on this, right? She's using it everywhere in her life. If I had it all my way, right? And so picture we're past all this, right? We're past all this. If you had it all your way, what would it be like on the other side of this? And describing that world, describing that way of relating, describing that need being met, that's all about the future, which men are all about the future. They're all about making the future better. And so what's describing it, if they can give it to us, they will, or they may have a counter. Well, if I had it all, I hear you, and if I had it all my way, and a lot of times their way's even better, which is awesome. Or they're just like, sure, let's do it all your way, because they don't have something that they need. So let's do it all your way. It's so fun to give someone all their way, right? When you're not sacrificing yourself, you don't need anything. Well, let's just do it all your way. Really?
But I think in some way this is like, you know, you mentioned as well about masculine and feminine. That it's not the same as a male and a woman, a man and a woman. And I think that as well makes it beautiful, because the more you know to be a woman with more of your feminine energy, like female energy, and all, you know, following your hormones as they are as a woman in the body of a woman, then you can be more woman and the man can be more the man. And I think it works even better because everybody's fulfilling their role, no? And I think it makes, although I know we're all different and we can be a bit of feminine and masculine, feminine and masculine in some way, I think the more you can be your, whatever is your energy, and the other partner can be their energy, whatever it is, the more I think you can work better together. Because I think there is a reason why men are more like rational and more like, you know, that's why they like to solve problems and stuff. And women, maybe we can be a bit more emotional. It doesn't mean that we don't think, but normally the feminine energy is a bit more emotional in some way, like more following the emotional side. So I think it's to have that kind of balance between the two. Like, no, I don't know. Am I saying nonsense?
No, you're doing fine. My face did what my face did when you said role. Right? You're doing great until to me, you said role, because role is, it's prescribed, it's societal, it's a kind of straitjacket, it's a supposed to be.
Okay.
And we get all messed up about it. And I think, you know, I don't use the terms masculine and feminine much these days because they have so much baggage. And I think more of a committed state of mind versus an open state of mind, which also fits. And you're also right. And it's one of the things that causes so much conflict between men and women, because as women, we trust our feelings, right? We've got this place right in the center of our chest, and it tells us what's true, and it's our feelings. And I distinguish between those and emotions. And one of the ways to think about it is that feelings have a place that they live in your body. They have a sustainable location. Like, you know, the place where you feel joy, where you feel happiness, where you feel sadness, that's often the same, right here in the center of the chest, right? And then there'll be another place where we feel fear or dread, and another place where we feel shame. And then there's the emotions, which someone once called it energy in motion. So I distinguish emotions from feelings, and this helps me to get along better with men. Because emotions are like anger and excitement, and they zoom around your body. They don't have a home. They just are like, and there's all these thoughts that go with it, and all these impulses that go with it. And men don't trust emotions. They pride themselves, and their measure of being a man and of other men is, do you have a grip on your emotions? And they think it's dishonorable to act on your emotions. That honor means to do the right thing. no matter how you're feeling, which includes love, no matter that you love somebody, no matter that they're your best friend, you still do the right thing. It's very tricky for them trying to manage these paradoxes of the right, honorable thing. And most women don't know that men struggle with that, right? That they want to be honorable. So they're striving for it. It's part of who they are. And I think men and women can be an enormous complement to each other. What men have said about working with women is they really appreciate our perspective. But again, it's that thing about they're very sensitive to how we're being, right? Are we being in partnership, offering another perspective to produce the result everyone's committed to? Or are we trying to be smarter than, better than, dominate, get our way, right? By saying, no, we should do it like this, right? So how we're being matters immensely, right? And then, as you were pointing out, Layla, the congruency between how we're being and what we're saying, right? That to them is sincerity, and they're very sensitive to when how we're being and what we're saying. Like women will say what sounds like a nice thing, but how we're being is actually chop chop, right? Yeah, and we can be really nasty that way, and they're very sensitive to it. And that's why I knew I couldn't just write a book telling women what to do. It had to be a book that also transformed how women were being. And then that way of being was applied to the words, right? And you can see that contrast between Kimberly and Melissa, same words, right? Exact same words, completely different ways of being, completely different results.
Yeah. For
That's
me, sorry, go ahead, Kristen.
That's something I actually really liked as well about the book, that Claudia never said, like, gave the solutions or anything. She allowed Kimberly and Karen to find their own answer themselves with exercise, everything. And I think that's the best way of learning, when you do it yourself, because you see it with your eyes, you understand it with your everything, not just with your mind, with everything, because you experience it yourself. And I think that's the best way when you actually learn, like the best way for learning. And I really thought, like, wow, this is so clever. I love it.
Thank you. I'm glad that you love it. And I've mentioned that I didn't really write it. I had to learn so much to be able to write it. But when I sat down to write it, it was like Keys the Kingdom. This screen opened up and a movie started playing. And I just typed as fast as I could. And every day I would sit down and clean up what I'd typed the day before, because it was a mess. And then by the time I was done editing it, the movie would start again. And I mean, the Queen's Code, I think, is somewhere around 96,000 words. And it took about 3 weeks to, quote, write it.
Well, ancient Greeks, they used to say that, we don't have like ideas and stuff. It's not ours, but it's something that we grasp from the universe. And and apparently, I don't know if you know the writer Elizabeth Gilbert, that she was talking about this genius. There's actually like a kind of how can I call it? Like an entity or something that it's like when you connect, then you get all the information. It's like you are connected in that thing, and then just you are the first one grasping the whole thing, and then you take it down, and then you materialize through your, through your uniqueness, your way of being, and you make it yours. But like you were connected to that entity that the ancient Greeks used to talk. So like a genius.
I could definitely relate to that. And I mean, I have read the book, and then recorded the book, and then have now listened to the recording of the book so many times, and it still surprises me. There are things I can't remember that they are taught in the Queen's Code, and I still cry, like sometimes sob, listening to the book, and or just laugh out loud. It still takes you by surprise. And like in chapter 5, when they're talking about jump starts, and Claudia tells them, "You should talk about that privately." And Kimberly wants, but it's just like every time, like, oh my gosh, yeah, just laugh out loud. It's so funny. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
I did as well. And there were moments I was listening. I was then calling again my husband, come, listen to this part, because it's like, yeah, it was.
Alison, I want you to talk about one more thing before we finish. And for me, it was the idea of trust, and how trust is actually so important to men. And in a world where pretty much every single woman is always taught to never trust a man because they're all cheaters and liars, and if you trust a man, it's like you're just building yourself a coffin, basically. And I feel like most women live in that reality. And what I've realized through learning your work and going through all of the information you provide, all of your books and interviews, is that this is actually not the case. And actually, the more we allow ourselves to truly trust a man, not in a naive kind of way, but just in a kind of higher sense way, where you trust that the person is not kind of like doing you wrong, and it's almost like you inspire that, it's like you create the space for the trust and for the trustworthiness. And even when people do wrong, you have compassion to kind of understand it instead of attacking them. And I found that sometimes when we don't trust people, we literally invite the worst in them, because we it's like we assume that they are like monsters, and then they kind of become them. So tell us more about that. What does trust mean to a man?
Oh boy. Okay, huge topic. Let me see if I can do the touch points quickly. I think what has us fundamentally think that we cannot trust men is that, again, in projecting onto them that they're just a version of ourselves, we want to trust them to do what we would do. And so, and we really want to live in this state of blanket trust, like, oh, isn't everything wonderful? Because I can just trust them. And always we have to finish the sentence. Trust him, trust her for what? What do you trust them for? And so we try to trust them for acting like women, thinking like women, doing what we would do. And so, of course, they break our trust all the time. But to trust them, what you're saying in a higher sense, yes, there are bad men, just as there are bad women. And you cannot trust them to have good motivations. But they're a small percentage. And men are really good at sniffing out the men that you can't trust to be up to good. They'll say he's up to no good. Stay away from him, he's up to no good. And unfortunately, we usually argue with the men who tell us that, right? Oh, no, he's just misunderstood. No. They know way better than us. So for most of men, like 97% of the population, if we trust that they have good intentions. So what if there's a good reason for that? It's not just what if there's a good reason, like a plausible reason. What if there's a good reason, an intent to do good? right? Good, a thoughtful reason, a well considered reason, a reason coming from wanting the best for another person. So there's so many good reasons. There's so much goodness in men. And that's worth trusting. But we then want to trust them to, like, you can trust a man to want you to have what you need. Unless he's way too sexually attracted, then he can't even think straight, which is a whole other topic. But you can trust him to want you to have what you need. But that does not mean you can trust him to know what you need. And it's one of the things that I have to teach men, that they can't trust themselves to know what she needs. That both men and women, we project onto another person. I call it decide and provide. We decide what someone needs, and then we provide it. Without this middle step, verify and clarify. Right? So we just decide and we provide it, and then we're upset when they're upset about it, or we're upset when they don't appreciate it, or we're upset when they reject it. But we didn't ask, right? And often we gave them what we would have wanted instead of checking. So before I spend time, money, energy on this, is this what you would want of me? Is there something else you'd want me to do instead? I call that the great give, right? The great ask we teach in the Queen's Code. The great give would be checking before you give, showing the other person the respect of knowing themselves better than you, of understanding themselves better than you, right? And there's so much honoring in that. That's really important. And so, yes, trusting that men are well-intended and that they want you to have what you need, and they will if they can. Trusting that, then it has the way we're being and the way that we're speaking. Now just allow that to flow. Instead of not trusting them, has us come to them suspicious and attacking, which causes them to retreat to protecting themselves from us. So instead of being in this overflow providing mode, they're now closed down and protecting themselves. Completely different energy, and we caused it. There are things the other way as well, like our Understanding Women online course is all about the behaviors in women that are not the best in women. There's ways to bring out the worst in women, just as bringing out the worst in men. And men often bring out the worst in women by doing things that it's unthinkable to them that would bring out the worst in anybody, like raising their voice. A man raising his voice means nothing to him or any other man. It scares the bejesus out of us, and we go into either fight, flight, or freeze. And fight, fight's going to occur like an attack. Freeze is going to occur like withholding and diminishing. And flee, they're completely mystified by. Maybe she had diarrhea. It never occurs to them, did I do something?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it does occur to them, but then they think, no, I just was talking.
Yes. Well, I don't know if it's time now to conclude. And is there something that you would like to, like, where can people find you, that you would like to say to our listeners, or anything that you would suggest to do, or the courses you do?
Let's see. Well, we just completed the first Your Queen's Code journey last week, and stunning results in 6 weeks' time, working through the book together. And they're just flabbergasted at what's happened to their lives. And so I decided to do another one that's starting the beginning of November. And we're taking the highlights from the first one, because I answered lots of questions. And so we're taking the highlights of those and people in the second one get to watch those highlights and then ask what they want to ask, right? So there's no redundancy, just great benefit. And it's really, it's a special experience, really special. And if someone isn't into fiction, they just give it to me down and dirty, I would encourage you to start with the Understanding Women online course, and then go to the Understanding Men online course. And the importance of the Understanding Women one is, first, it's always contrasting, because I'm translating womenness into manness, helping men to understand women while helping women to understand themselves. And it illuminates what we need and why we need it, and that it's valid, because it's so normal for us is to invalidate, right? To think I shouldn't need that, and therefore I shouldn't ask for it because they'll think I shouldn't need that, right? And we all need to stick up for ourselves a lot more. I love when you said your husband came to you and told you what wasn't working for him. It's courageous and it's generous. It's kind. It's so kind to tell someone. But you had to make it safe for him to tell you that. So good job, you. Yeah. It takes two to tango and two to tangle, and it's our choice. And so just thank you for talking about how you're affected by the Queen's Code. I've also been deeply affected by the Queen's Code, and it's one of the things that is really interesting about being in a relatively new relationship. We're coming up on 2 years now. It's like I've had to relearn it all, right? After having been married for so long and applying everything to my husband, and so many things just worked out, right? And in the almost 3 decades, right? There are a lot of things that are happening in the background, and then to have to rework it out with somebody not familiar with my work, and so have to be like Kimberly and Karen, right? Paying attention, wide awake, and catching myself. I mean, a year ago, I was frog farming Dan, big time. Yeah, I was frog farming him. And I thought that he had changed because I moved. I moved here from 200 plus miles away. And now he knows he's got me. He's changed. Wait a second. This sounds eerily familiar, kind of scary. Wait a second. And I was recording the audiobook at the time, so it saved my life. It saved my life, and it's like, okay, we need a reset here. What do I need to own? How have I diminished him? How have I disrespected him? How have I hurt him that now he's gone from this amazingly generous, helpful, attentive, loving person to someone mostly who just stays away? Which wouldn't be so noticeable in a long distance relationship, right? But now 90 of my steps away from his house, really noticeable.
Yeah, I think it's a non-stop kind of learning anyway. And as Leila was saying, you can forget, even yourself, you wrote it, you can even forget what you wrote and then go back to it. And I think even if you know it, still there is always something new, maybe some new words to add to your other words. Like, I think there's always something new. So yeah, thank you.
I think every relationship is kind of like a new journey to discover your own self, right? And that's what's kind of amazing. So what you have is like the tools to, dig deeper and find out and things like that. So
yeah,
again, thank you so much for writing the book.
yes.
Even though you say you didn't write it.
I typed it.
And thank you for recording it as well, because honestly, it does create such a deeper experience. So we are both very grateful for it. And I'm sure many women around the world will feel the same.
And by the way, this is the first audiobook I ever heard. Like I never done, this is the first, because I like to read books, and
Yes.
I prefer more like reading and sometimes taking notes, and I like lots of the paper. But I was like, oh wow, this is another experience, like listening and the intention of the person, because you know exactly what you want to say and how you want to say it. I really, really loved it. So just you know, that is my first experience as well.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Just so you know, one of the things we're doing in your Queen's Code journey is for each chapter, we pull the written word out of the book. So we have Karen's notes, we have Karen's assignments, we reprint the list that Kimberly and Karen make in the beginning of, you know, what is a man doing and how is he reacting to it.
I'm not going to put it too close, but I have it too with
That's
all
awesome.
the things I've do it too.
That's awesome. Good for you. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I look forward to next time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.